Good morning and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Dave Deacon, and we're coming to you from the National Junior Angus Show, where nearly 1,800 cattle have called Tulsa home for the last week. We'll have more on that later in the show. But we start off this week with an alternative summer forage option for cattle. With that, here's Lyndall Stout.
Joining us now is Dave Wellman, our Extension Beef Cattle Specialist, to talk about a cover crop and grazing study underway at OSU. And Dave, you and the team have been working on this for a while now. Tell us what you've been doing out here in this pasture. Give us an update.
That's right. We came out last summer and looked at the sorghum, sudan, and sun hemp and cowpea cover crop that we had. This is the same land, but we've got crabgrass on it this year. But still, the primary objective is the same, and that is working with Dr. Warren in Plant and Soil Sciences. We're trying to establish optimal conditions for wheat planting this fall. I mean, that's really the primary objective. And then secondarily, we're hoping that we can get some additional productivity out of the cover crop by grazing cattle on it through that late summer, mid to late summer period.
And this summer you have crabgrass planted out here. Last year you had something different. Talk about what's going on this summer and why it's a little different and what the thought is behind it.
Okay, we used brown midrib sorghum sudan last summer along with a little bit of sun hemp and cowpeas. Last year we discovered, and producers told us, that the cattle didn't graze the sun hemp or the cowpeas very well, and so that was one of the factors. You know, we had quite a bit of sorghum sudan production or dry matter, but it was only about 60% of the stand. And so in terms of forage availability, if the cows ignore 40%, you don't have as much as it looks like you have. With crabgrass this year, we just broadcast the crabgrass seed to encourage the crabgrass stand, because we know we're going to get some crabgrass if we have moisture. And so it cut out the drilling, the no-till drill. It also was less expensive from just a seed standpoint. And a lot of producers have crabgrass to graze in the summer anyway.
Now you mentioned that you limit graze, and we see the pasture is kind of taped off, so you're primarily focusing on this area right now, and then you'll shift to the back part of the pasture?
What you're referring to is that we have a little rotational grazing pattern set up here. So we've just got these little pastures broken into 3 sections, and so we'll graze about a 5-acre section. By the way, there's 25 head of cattle, yearling, fall-born calves out here. So there's about 17,500 pounds of beef per acre out here grazing. The reason for the 3 sections in each little pasture is because we want to try to take it down relatively quick to about 40 to 50% of the stand, and then move on and let that grow back if we get the moisture. And so far we've had a lot of moisture and it's come back pretty fast.
We have. It's been quite a summer. Now, in terms of the pasture, is it better to graze it than to harvest hay out of here?
That's one of the primary principles of the project, is that, you know, if you graze it and the animals defecate out there where they're grazing, they're returning about 80 to 85% of the nutrients that they harvest go right back into the soil, except it's processed, right? So we think that's a big benefit and very little cost actually to the grazing system in terms of nutrient removal, you know, nitrogen fertilizer, phosphorus fertilizer, and so on, is returned to the soil. So it should be a very substantial benefit.
And overall, what do you hope to get out of this and out of the study?
We hope that the cattle will gain somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 pounds a day. They gained a little bit less than that last year on the sorghum sedan. And so we hope to get some cattle gain, which is obviously very valuable in this high cattle market that we have. But really that's the secondary objective. The primary objective again is optimal as we can create soil conditions for planting the wheat this fall. And so we'll try to remove these cattle when there's 40 to say 50% or 6 to 8 inches or something like that of residual left to protect the soil surface from the sun drying it out.
Okay, Dave Wellman, our Extension Beef Cattle Specialist, thank you very much, and we'll catch up with you again when you have some research results in a few months.
Sounds good.
Thanks a lot.
So often we're on SUNUP talking about wheat varieties, but there's a lot of varieties in cotton too. And Randy, you have got some different varieties who have different traits with the technologies in there too. Let's talk about that.
Well, Dave, in actuality, where we're sitting at right now in terms of what the growers are mostly planting would be some Monsanto technologies, Bollgard 2 and Roundup Ready Flex. Both of those technologies have been around for quite some time. The Bollgard 2, I think, was available in 2004, and Roundup Ready Flex came out in 2005, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going off memory here. But certainly that's kind of been the backbone, the bread and butter. Of course, the Roundup Ready Flex technology allows us to spray Roundup over the top, full season, without any issues.
Right.
Of course, if anybody's paying attention to what's going on in agriculture today, they're fully aware that we have problems with herbicide-resistant weeds, particularly glyphosate-resistant weeds in the cotton patch.
Right.
And one of those weeds that's a killer is the Palmer amaranth. And so there's been some moves in the lab, and actually we're beginning to see some of the fruits of that in the field. With some other type technologies that are very, very useful to us. So again, the Bollgard 2 Roundup Ready Flex would be one that has been around for a while and that most growers are very familiar with. One of the technologies that we have here is from Bayer. This is a FiberMax variety. It's a FiberMax brand variety. It's 1830, and it contains the traits Glytol, Liberty Link, and Twin Link. All three of those traits are stacked. And so what we have is Glytol, which is essentially Bayer Crop Sciences version of a glyphosate-tolerant cotton plant. It is proprietary to Bayer, so that's the Glytol. We have the Liberty Link, which that essentially imparts tolerance to glufosinate herbicide or Liberty herbicide. That is stacked with the Glytol. And then we have the Twin Link BT. And the Twin Link BT is a 2 BT trait system that is proprietary to Bayer. So the latest one that we have would be this one, which is the Bollgard 2 Extend Flex trait from Monsanto. And of course, we've been working on getting this particular trait evaluated across the belt for the last several years, and it's really turning into a really nice system. This is the first year for these. We'll be treating these particular varieties at this location that have the B2XF trait, which does impart tolerance to dicamba, to Roundup. Essentially, it's a Roundup Ready Flex type trait incorporated into that. And then the third trait would be the Liberty Link trait. These plants, we can actually spray these over the top. So this is the first 3 herbicide trait system available in the marketplace.
And this has been welcomed with all this newfound weed pressure.
That's absolutely correct. And even though we don't currently have a dicamba product that's labeled, I think Monsanto anticipates getting that approval perhaps, I don't know, late this year, certainly by the time we begin planting next year. But it will be very highly welcomed, I think, by growers, because it will provide them another tool in the toolbox to be able to use against these glyphosate resistant weeds, particularly the glyphosate resistant pigweeds.
Why do we see these issues in cotton and say not another crop?
Well, it's not just in cotton.
Right.
We need to recognize that weed resistance is a big problem. It's a problem in corn, it's a problem in soybeans, it's a problem, and those are actually transgenic crops.
Right.
So there's issues there. We're seeing weed resistance in fields of peanuts, and that's been going on for many, many years. Right. And of course we have no transgenic peanuts. So just because you have a transgenic crop doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to, automatically be responsible for weed resistance, because we actually have resistant weeds in the wheat fields.
Right.
Kochia, I think, is one of those. And it all crosses over, and a lot of our growers really want, and they're really looking for the opportunity to rotate. Mm-hmm. With other crops. And so you have to be very mindful when you get into this rotation mode. If you're using various herbicides, number one, do I have any issues with those herbicides causing me potential problems down the road if I rotate to wheat, or if I plant sorghum in this field next year or whatever. So that's a very significant reality, and growers have to be mindful if they're looking at using these various herbicides in the cotton patch, or in the peanut patch, or in the soybean patch, or wherever. They really have to take care of business and make sure that they're not going to potentially affect their rotational crop down the road.
Okay, well, Randy, I tell you what, we'll come back later this year and see how the plants are doing.
Great. Yeah, well, hopefully we'll continue to get this rain, and maybe we can park our center pivots for a little bit longer.
There we go. Randy Bowman, cotton specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Good morning, everybody. Al Southern is off this week, so you have your trusty state climatologist to guide you through the program. And let's start out with the obvious. It's summer and it's hot. That dreaded heat dome is camped over Oklahoma and the southern plains. This is normal for July, so nothing to be worried about, but it certainly makes it miserable as we've gone through the last week or two. And this is the result of all of our rain when combined with that heat dome. Lots of evaporation, turning all that surface water, soil moisture, and transpiration from plants into water vapor, which leads to heat indices into the 110s at times. So we've been really hot, but we've also been really moist and sultry. Certainly not a pleasant week in Oklahoma. Another byproduct of the heat dome, all the storm systems get deflected up and over Oklahoma and the southern plains. So our rainy days are apparently over for a while. Hopefully we'll see something next week, but until then we're going to be high and dry and hot and dry. Now for some good news. The latest outlook from the National Weather Service's Climate Prediction Center for the August through October period still sees above normal rainfall chances for Oklahoma, at least through that time period. Again, we have that El Nino out in the Equatorial Pacific, lots of soil moisture available, so hopefully we will see that moisture continue into the fall when we really need it for planting season. And with that good news, we come to the U.S. seasonal drought outlook. Again, we see no chances, at least according to the Climate Prediction Center, for drought to develop across Oklahoma through the end of October, and that would be certainly wonderful news and much different than what we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years. Speaking of which, another great milestone for the drought monitor. With the loss of the final remaining abnormally dry yellow spot in the Panhandle, we now have a color-free drought monitor map for the first time since May 25th of 2010, and then may that be the start of a long string of color-free maps. So it's pretty simple. We got the heat dome. We have a sort of a normal July situation, possibly chance for some showers and thunderstorms next week. When you're watching this, hopefully we're seeing those in the forecast, and then we'll just see what August brings. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
The Oklahoma wheat crop is all but in the books. Kim, how did the crop look on paper?
Well, I'd say it best looked like Jekyll and Hyde, you know, really good and, well, I don't want to say really bad. There was some really bad of it, but you know, it was mixed. Milling quality, the reports I get is that there's some problems like the millers had trouble last year figuring out how to handle that high protein. This is another year figuring out how to handle this crop, but we've got some good stuff, and then we've got some stuff that's going to have to be worked on.
Well, and the price was kind of that way throughout the year too.
If you look at the prices during harvest, you know, that Kansas City September contract, you know, low of $5, a high of $6.11, $1.11 moved right there. You look at it over this last week, we were above $6, which is where we want to be. It couldn't stay down there. It came down and tested $5.50. If we break that $5.50, then I think we can go down to lose another 15 or 20, go down to $5.30, $5.35, something like that. But the price and the quality of the crop was just all over the board.
With the Oklahoma wheat crop done, how are we looking worldwide?
Well, if you look at the world crop, we're probably about halfway done on that, about 50% of it harvested. If you look around the countries, China's got about a third of theirs left to cut. The U.S. Probably less than 50%, the EU less than 50%. Of course, Canada, Argentina, Australia, they've got 100% of theirs cut. They won't start cutting on theirs till late August, November, something like that, that time period. Of course, India and North Africa are both finished.
With the wheat off the plant across the world, should Oklahoma producers be storing it or selling it?
I think right now is probably a good time. We talked about the third and the third and the third. I don't think that it's going to pay to store. I think the odds are probably 60% that it's going to be lower in December than it is now, but we're just going to have to wait and see what's going on.
Well, Kim, switching to corn, there's been a lot of volatility in the price. What are producers expecting?
Well, over the last 30 days or so, in 22-day time period, we had an 87-cent move in corn prices. You look at that December contract, $3.63 up to $4.52. During that period, the funds bought 340,000 contracts of corn. That's 1.7 billion bushels. Right now, corn's long about 212,000 or 1.06 billion bushels. You know, that's a tremendous amount of longs, and you know, the good news there is that they brought prices up, but the bad news is that they're extremely long. You look at that December contract right now, it's got support at 433 and 419 and resistance at 454.
Okay, Kim Anderson, grain marketing specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Spring rains that we've had this spring, 2015, means that we've got great summer growth of our pastures all across the state. That also means that we can take advantage of a concept in ruminant nutrition that can really be helpful to us in terms of performance of cattle and efficiency of the use of our supplement dollars. That concept that I'm talking about has a big fancy name. We call it a positive associative effect. What that's referring to is that we can add just a little bit of protein to cattle consuming lots of average to low quality roughage and really get a real bang for our protein dollar. You see, what's going on here is that as these cattle consume a high protein supplement, something like soybean meal, cottonseed meal, or one of the byproducts that's high in protein, even though it's in a fairly small package, 1 to 2 pounds per head per day, that added protein helps the bugs, the microorganisms in the rumen, to grow, to multiply. They are the things that help to digest the cellulose that's in the plants that are out here in our pastures. We know as we go into late July, August, and September, the quality of the pasture is going to deteriorate. The plants are maturing, and as we get drier conditions, we know the protein content is going to drop. But with a little bit of added protein and the microorganisms doing their job, these cattle will consume this forage and make better use of it than they certainly would without it. Take a look at this research that was done here at Oklahoma State University. What they did was use some replacement heifers that were given 1.75 pounds per head per day of cottonseed meal. And as you can see here, the amount of time it takes these heifers to consume and digest the roughage is shortened considerably when they have the protein supplement. The retention time in the rumen is reduced 32%. That means that these cattle can consume more roughage. They can take in more of the pasture, and in fact their intake was raised about 27%. Other research that we've looked at shows us that these cattle that are consuming this roughage with the presence of the protein, that the roughage is actually used at a greater extent, a higher digestibility. So there's two things going in our favor. There's more intake, and they're getting better utilization out of the forage that they do consume. Bottom line is that for a small amount of protein supplement, we get considerably increased performance of the cattle in terms of stocker gains, heifer growth, even replacing body condition in some young, thin cows that we're concerned about as we go into the fall and winter months. So consider this concept of using a small package of high protein supplement in those situations where you'd like to get some added performance of these cattle this late summer and fall period, and I think it'll help your performance and your bottom line. And we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Joining us now is our Extension Livestock Marketing Specialist, Darrell Peel. And Darrell, let's talk about meat production, starting with beef.
Well, you know, so far this year, beef production has continued to decline after a sharp decline last year. For the year to date, beef production is down about 4.7%. Slaughter is still running down close to 7% for this year, pretty much across the board. Steers, heifers, cows, at least beef cows are down, and total cow slaughter is down as well. So, you know, we're going to end the year down 1.5% to 2% probably on beef production, again, further squeezing those beef supplies.
And what about pork and poultry?
Well, the situation for pork and poultry is very different than beef. We're looking at increased production on both of those. On the poultry side, you know, we've had a lot of concerns about avian influenza, which has not directly impacted broiler production from a meat standpoint, but it has impacted turkey production, and of course it's impacted egg production as well. We're looking at you know, an increase about 6% or so on broiler production for the end of the year. On the pork side, the problem there is really a lack of disease, and of course that's a good thing to not have problems with PED virus, but the pork industry really ramped up breeding last year in anticipation of continued problems with PED. Not having those problems, we're not seeing the mortality. We've got a sharp increase, about a 7% increase in pork production this year.
Now, what's the trade situation looking like for those meats?
The trade situation, of course, is important in terms of what winds up being left for consumers in the domestic market. All of the meats have struggled this year because of you know, the strong dollar. Again, on the beef side, we have record high prices essentially, or very close to it, aggravated by that strong dollar. So beef exports are off, beef imports are up, and because of that, you know, beef consumption in the U.S. will probably be about unchanged, even with the decrease in beef production that we talked about. On the pork side, again, pork exports are down a little bit, although pork has gotten quite a bit cheaper because of the big supply there, and so we've seen exports recently pick up a little bit, but they're still down for the year. On the poultry side, even though avian influenza didn't directly impact the broiler industry in terms of the disease impacts, it did impact the trade situation, and a number of markets have been restricted, and so as a result of that, broiler exports are off as well.
And what factors are we watching as we move into the second half of the year?
You know, across all the meat industries, there's a number of factors out there that will be very important. You know, in a general sense, this global economic environment and particularly the strength of the dollar will be important, and we'll continue to watch that. From a feed standpoint, we're watching our crops. There's still quite a bit of uncertainty about where we end up with corn and soybean production in particular. We still don't have a handle on planted acreage for soybeans, let alone how many will get harvested when it's all said and done, and the same is true on corn as well in terms of harvested acres. So we'll be watching feed markets. You know, on the beef side, there's a lot of uncertainty about just how fast and how hard we're pushing herd expansion. That will determine supplies, and we're also watching carcass weights in terms of their impact on beef production.
Okay, thanks, Darrell. We'll see you next time.
Hi, welcome to Shop Stop. Today we want to talk about an easy way to hold a bolt or a nut into a socket when you're reaching into an odd space with it.
Okay, typically what happens with me is I've got my bolt or nut in my socket, and I'm trying to fit it down in the space, and it's falling out on me.
Well, what you can do is just get a small piece of molder's clay or some putty or something like that, and put it inside of your socket.
We prefer blue, and we stick it in here, and we put the bolt in and just press it against there, and you can turn it up and it holds your bolt in your socket.
Just a little tip for trying to hold a bolt or a nut into a socket when you're trying to go into that odd space.
Hey, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Shop Stop.
There are hours of preparation that go into each steer and heifer before they even set hoof in the National Junior Angus show ring. With a behind-the-scenes look, here's Melanie Jackson.
So we're here at the National Junior Angus show in Tulsa.
It's where all the juniors from across the United States and Alaska and Puerto Rico come to exhibit their livestock, their Angus cattle, with bred and owned cow-calf pairs, steers, bulls, and owned heifers.
And basically what we're doing is we're here exhibiting our cattle, but we're also making connections, making friends. We've got opportunities for public speaking, extemporaneous speaking, team sales, cook-off, basically anything and everything to get juniors involved in representing the Angus breed.
I like coming to the show because I get to meet all my friends from across the state, and you get to see like all the different types of, like, it's the same breed, but all the different types of looks and kinds of cattle.
You see old friends and you make new ones. It's a great time for everybody to get together, and you get to exhibit one of the best breeds in the nation. Learn that it takes a lot of hard work. You can't just go out 2 days before the show and throw a halter on them. It teaches kids responsibility, it teaches them dedication and hard work, and shows that you can get stuff done if you really put your mind to it.
Well, in the morning, you have to pull it up really early in the morning, make sure you wash it, make sure it has time to lay down, eat, drink, and then you have to fit them all the way, pull their legs, pull their top line, pull their tail heads, make them look flashy.
I love walking into the ring and just being able to show. It's you and the calf. You walk in and then you walk out, and you either walk out a champion or you walk out learning something. You always learn something, but to walk in and know that it is you and your calf and the judge, I don't know, it's a weird feeling, but it's a great one.
Well, thank you for joining us this week for SUNUP as we come to you from the National Junior Angus Show in Tulsa. If you saw something on the show that you'd like to learn more about, visit our website, sunup.okstate.edu, and visit our social media. I'm Dave Deacon, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at SUNUP.